go ahead and start.
Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, January 13th Board of Education meeting. I invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening. The first order of business here is to take action on the minutes of the December 9th regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Second?
Are there any questions, corrections, comments on those minutes?
There have been some corrections that have already been given to the clerk.
Okay. Any that we need to
No.
be aware of? Okay. Any other? All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay. The next item on the agenda is public forum for topics on the board agenda. I will note that there may be individuals who are interested in commenting on the proposed budget. I will note that Dr. Freeman is going to be doing a budget presentation shortly in the meeting. So if people would like to kind of hold comments or questions until the second opportunity for public questions, you may choose to do that. But that is not a requirement. It is simply an invitation if you'd like to hear the presentation first. So having said that, this is a time where people are welcome to come up and comment on any item on the agenda if they so choose. Is there anyone who would choose to do that? All right, seeing none, I am going to ask Mr. Stans to address the expenditures for the month of December, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The expenditures for the month of December were $4,964,807.53. It was a pretty standard month for us. The expenditures through December were 43.68% of the budget, and that compared to 43.21% of last year's budget at this time. We also went through the warrants in some detail at the Operations Committee meeting, and everything looked pretty standard there. So I would make a motion to approve the financials for December.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, student representatives, welcome. How are you tonight? Excellent. Ready to hear your report.
Start with Guilford High School. We have midterms coming up in 2 weeks, and a lot of teachers are already preparing and trying to get in their last few units before we review and finally take the exams. Rehearsals for the musical Into the Woods have started, and the cast has been working hard, as well as the crew. The pit orchestra will be starting their rehearsals soon, but the music hasn't come in yet, so hopefully that'll start up in a minute. And then there will be 2 writing competitions among English classes. Have learned about these, even though they're not school-wide. They're mostly just open to the public. And there's the Christine Cohen one, where she's hoping to get some kids to submit their pieces of writing. And then there's a William Thornton one, which is through the Hampden Public Library, and it's open to anyone in New Haven County schools.
And on top of that, the school will also be offering the American Mathematics Competition, which is a nationwide test that they also offered last year. This will be taken on the 5th of February. And winter sports right now are also doing very well. Fencing is undefeated. And yeah.
For Guilford Lakes, it is National Mentoring Month across the nation. So they are celebrating their 20th anniversary of mentoring. The principal wanted me to mention that the commitment to mentoring is minimal, only about an hour a day or so, and the impact is really huge on all the kids. Renee Soares is going to be visiting for a week as a guest artist from the community to guide kids through art classes as the district takes initiative on trying to do more art in classes and in school. The kids will be working on mandalas and learning about the history behind them. The Guilford Lake staff took a poll around the school asking questions such as what are your best talents? And some of the featured answers were sneaking up on people, thumb wars, yo-yoing, and sleeping. And the monthly theme of Guilford Lakes is kindness this month. For Adams, on December 16th, the Adams Chorus held their holiday concert at Adams, and on December 17th, the Adams Orchestra performed their concert at the GHS Performing Arts Center. At the conclusion of the concert, Mr. Jones invited all who were interested to join the performers on stage to see what it was like to be on stage. January 8th, the Adams Jazz Band and the 7th grade band had their first concert of the year and played to a packed house. Also January 8th, Adams welcomed author Padma Venkatraman to the school to meet with 7th grade students. Her most recent novel, The Bridge Home, was selected as 2019's Global Read Aloud book. On Friday, January 17th, the 8th grade music students will be taking a field trip to Lincoln Center to hear a performance by the New York Philharmonic, and they will have a guided tour of Lincoln Center as well.
For Melissa Jones School, an assembly was held on December 6th, where they held a school-wide assembly to introduce the school's Look for Good campaign. This is a scientifically backed school-wide gratitude campaign that helps students, parents, and teachers unite around kindness for 2 weeks, and it can positively impact the school climate for the rest of the year. Students in the 3rd grade have also finished up their unit on ocean animals, and they finished up by sharing their research with the Guilford Public Library, and their projects are on display. 4th grade students have had the Colonial truck delivered to classroom thanks to the Guilford Keeping Society, and the trunk is filled with replicas of early Guilford games and toys that the students get to explore and use in the classroom before they have a chance to use similar items on early Guilford Day. Such items include Jacob's Ladder, cat cradle, inkwell and feather pens, slate boards, chalk, knitting, dominoes, and dice games. As for Baldwin Middle School, January is a very busy month for the music groups. The chorus concert will be held on Wednesday, January 15th. The band concert is scheduled for the 22nd, and the orchestra is scheduled for the 29th. In addition to these evening concerts, students in all 3 groups will perform for their classmates during school day performances as well. The 6th grade band is also excited to be participating in the band Jamboree on February 4th. As for art projects, students have been working on artist projects in art class and in their library media center. So this year, students were asked to choose 2 artists, research their work, and then also create a piece of art that resembled a mashup of the 2 artist styles. The students are presenting their work to each other in a gallery walk setting, explaining the influence of each artist and their work of art. Lastly, Baldwin also has Community Days, which has devoted portions of early release days to focus on community building, supporting their mission to make school a positive, supportive place for all. They have held 2 community days so far this year, with their 3rd one scheduled for the end of the month. Students plan, organize, and run an all-school assembly to start each community day. These days have become touchstones in their continued work around social and emotional learning.
Excellent, thank you. Does anyone have any questions or follow-up? Wonderful, thank you for joining us. As always, you are
Thank you,
welcome
guys.
to stay, but we recognize that you probably have some things to do. So feel free to leave as well if you'd like. But thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Dr. Freeman, I think you're up.
I'm going to move to the podium.
Okay.
You guys are welcome to stay for my presentation.
That would not be the best use of your time.
Thank you very much. I know that I don't usually make my presentations from the podium, but as we are presenting the administrative draft of the budget, and as this is going to be a lengthier than normal presentation, it has become tradition for me to move over to the podium as we share this presentation. Members of the Board of Education received your budget books, I believe it was a week ago today. Members of the Board of Finance have received the budget books as well. But this is my first opportunity to present this budget to you, the board, and to the community. I would like to walk you through a number of slides, and as we have done in the past, the presentation will essentially fall into four big chunks. The first will be how we make our decisions, and we'll begin by talking about our vision and our mission and our guiding principles in the district. I know that we do that every year, but I feel that that is the place we need to begin with any budget presentation. We will then talk about efficiencies that we have strived to achieve in this budget. While I know that the task that I have been given in this community is to provide this community with the most exceptional educational opportunity that we can, I also know that there are fiscal responsibilities that come with that. And every year we work to find efficiencies within the budget and bring forward a budget that is responsible as well as a program that is exceptional. We'll then talk about cost drivers. Every year, there are certain things that are simply unavoidable cost increases, and every year I like to identify those and pull those out for you, the board, and for the community. And finally, we will talk about investments. I do believe that it is my responsibility to help this system be more effective every year. We need to be better tomorrow than we are today. I have not yet brought you a status quo budget, and I have no intention of bringing this community a status quo budget. So we'll begin, and we'll walk through those four areas. The budget is built on our foundational beliefs and documents. A budget is a value statement. Where we place our money says something about what we value in our community. The budget begins with vision and mission. Our vision in this community is to foster a learning community that invites effort and supports rigor, and our mission is to foster excellence in a respectful and challenging academic environment. We do that through a dogged focus on instruction, through visionary instructional leadership at our building level, and through focusing on the professional learning of our teachers. Every year, that large and 30,000-foot vision and mission, every year is translated into a set of annual district priorities. This year, the priorities that this board approved in September remained similar to what we have done in the past. First and foremost, we focus on our schools being physically and emotionally safe, healthy, and equitable places of learning, so that emotional wellness component comes first, but it's there in service of the learning environment that we expect to be, academic learning as well as emotional and social learning. Secondly, if we can provide that foundational environment, we then know that we achieve excellence by providing our teaching staff with a professionally supportive and instructionally focused environment. And finally, if the first two pieces are in place, then and only then are we able to create the classroom environments where every day in every classroom, students are invited to try their hardest and to engage in academic rigor. You can't get there without the first two. And I am proud that this community has embraced essentially these three priorities for going on the last decade. Underneath the priorities, every year we identify specific initiatives, specific work that falls under those umbrella statements. This year, the work focuses on looking at our school climate and ensuring that we are globally and culturally aware and accepting. It continues to focus on that classroom environment to make sure that we are designing learning tasks that invite students to care and try hard, and that are built on strategies that foster social and emotional wellness. If we're building on 21st century skills like communication and collaboration, our students aren't just learning content, they're also learning those skills. We continue to focus on our professional learning communities, the opportunities that teachers have to learn from teachers in our community. It has become our primary source of professional learning, and we continue to work on ways to leverage those opportunities so that we create tasks that engage every kid every day. This year, as last year, there's been a focus on STEM. For some previous years, there was a focus on specific mathematics instruction, but this year there has been a focus on STEM instruction. This has included professional development in science instruction at Adams. It has included looking at how we embed STEM opportunities across our curriculum. The board saw a presentation about some of the summer opportunities that were built around engineering, and I'll talk about some of the continued STEM work built into this budget. We continue to focus on our teaching skills and our teaching moves, particularly on 3 high-leverage instructional practices, high-leverage, high-yield instructional practices that cut across grade level and subject area. Every teacher in this school district has been working on student discourse, academically productive talk in the classrooms. How do we let the students talk more than the teachers? And while this presentation is not a good example of that, it is something that we've been focusing on. We focus on effective feedback. How do we encourage students to first get and secondly digest feedback that they receive about their learning and their work? Feedback is not simply teacher to student. It should also be peer to peer, and there's also a self-reflective self-feedback component that we're striving towards. And finally, using writing as a tool for thinking and learning, not simply as a summative way of measuring what our students know at the end. And finally, we have looked to employ balanced assessment systems in our district. How do we balance formative assessment, assessment that helps us as the educators make better decisions about planning, with the summative assessments that our students engage in every day? That's something that we continue to work to be better at, as do most school districts in the state of Connecticut. In addition to our vision and our mission and our priorities and our initiatives that speak to the learning environment that we strive to create, there's also been a set of assumptions about budget work that we have brought year after year into our budget work. Again, a budget is a values document. First, every dollar that we spend should make this place safer and healthier as a school environment. We're going to move monies towards physical safety, towards emotional safety. We're going to do whatever we can to make sure every decision moves in that direction. Second, we maintain that dogged focus on instruction. We're a learning organization. How do we continue to create environments and tasks that foster social emotional wellness while leading towards academic learning? We shouldn't sacrifice one for the other. How do we continue to build on teachers learning from teachers? How do we continue to incorporate STEM opportunities? And how do we continue to leverage those practices that I just spoke about? Finally, next, every year we're looking to expand opportunities for all students. I said before this was not going to be a status quo budget. It isn't. You will see that there are some efficiencies, but there are also going to be investments. We hope that we can offset one with the other. And finally, this is to be a creative budget. We have never come with you under the assumption that every year we ask for more. We look at first how we're expending the resources that we have been provided. We look to be creative with those resources before asking the community to contribute additional dollars. And then it becomes about enrollment. The bottom line is that we program for the students that we have in our classrooms in front of us. And enrollment is an important consideration. You will see that this year we project to be down 73 students. We've gone down between 50 and 70 students over a number of the last several years. In fact, in a 20-year look back, the enrollment in this district peaked in 2001 with an enrollment of 3,916 students. We've seen slow declines in enrollment over that period of time. If you look this year, you'll notice that the decline is clustered at a couple of levels. The high school projects to be 40 students smaller next year than it is today. And Adams projects to be 49 students smaller than it is today. Remember, Adams is half the size of the high school. Adams is looking at losing 9% of their population from this year to next. That's a reality that we need to take into consideration when we program for the schools. Visually, what enrollment looks like is this. The green line shows our actual enrollment. We have declined 350 students since 13-14. Now, the red line shows the projected decline when we had a demographic study and enrollment projection done 10 years ago. In fact, the red line shows you what many similarly situated communities have been experiencing in Connecticut. 2 of our neighboring shoreline school districts have recently closed elementary schools because of enrollment that looks like the red line. Now, while we are not experiencing those kinds of decreases in Guilford, we are seeing enrollment declines, and this budget is responsive to those enrollment declines. So to get to the bottom line, which is what everybody's waiting for, the proposed budget that we bring tonight in our administrative draft is a budget request of $61,845,459. It's the single largest expenditure that the town of Guilford makes. The educational expense in Guilford is our single greatest investment. That represents an increase over this current year's budget of $1,294,628, a percentage increase of 2.14%. To put that in context, in the first several budgets that we worked on as a leadership team, we were seeing increases of close to 3.5%, and then 3%, and then 2.5%. We had a year where the budget failed to pass. We needed to bring the budget back three times to the voters before the budget passed. And since that time, we've been seeing increases in the low ones or that float around the 2% increase. This budget tonight represents a 2.14% increase. And so to begin, let me talk about the efficiencies that are built into this budget. The budget is responsive to the declining enrollment. This budget will show reduced FTEs in response to enrollment. But I want to make clear that while we're being responsive to the enrollment declines, we are not sacrificing class sizes. Currently today, the average class size K through 4 is 18 students. This budget prepares for an average class size next year of 18 students, K through 4. You have in your packets a snapshot of our current enrollment as well as a projection that includes sectioning for the elementary schools to show that elementary level. In addition to reductions in FTEs, however, the budget also includes efficient and creative reuse of FTEs. Over the last several years, as our enrollment has declined, we haven't simply cut staff to lower our bottom line. We have reinvested classroom positions into special education positions, counseling and support positions, and coaching positions, moving FTEs into positions that support teachers and students rather than maintaining frontline positions and reducing to enrollment levels that become undefendable at the community level. This budget includes some of that creativity and some of those reassignments. I'm also incredibly proud, and the board should share in this pride, in the medical benefits line. The medical benefits in this budget moving forward are lower than they were since 14-15. This board has worked very hard to renegotiate the employment contracts with all of our employees, maintaining the quality of the benefits, but expecting us, your employees, to work harder to manage those benefits. By moving to HSAs, we have reduced the cost of medical benefits, same doctors. My kids see their same doctor. I have more paperwork to do, but that allows us to reduce the expense of those medical benefits to this community. 85% of this budget is made up by salary and associated benefits for our employees, and when we can make efficiencies like that, we're moving in the right direction. And finally, I need to nod to our principals and our department leaders who have kept costs down. You will again see this year, as you have for the past several years, that materials and supplies are kept. I can't think of a better word than saying it's frugal. Our principals work very hard to make sure that teachers have just what they need and just when they need it, and they do it on a very tight budget, and I appreciate and applaud them for that work. To show you what I mean a little bit around these efficiencies, I want to show you specifically medical spending. Medical spending is down $400,000 over what we spent last year. And again, our employees are receiving the same benefits. They do have to work a little harder for those benefits. I want to show you budget by location, and I want to note this is budget without salary. This is essentially budget that is put towards equipment, supplies, materials at the school levels. And what you will see is that most of our schools are working around a zero. Now you'll see a larger decrease at Adams, and that's reflective of the enrollment decrease. I want to point out you'll see an increase in Lakes, That's a direct result of money that we received from the Guilford Fund for Education. A couple of years ago, GFFE funded flexible seating in one classroom, giving students the opportunities to have access to standing desks and rockers and different opportunities for furniture when they're working. And we saw such a success in that one classroom that this year we're piloting more of that furniture and spreading more options throughout the whole building. I do need to note that if the whole building experience is as successful as the one classroom experience was, you should be ready to see more equipment requests for similar furniture at the other elementary schools moving forward. But that's a direct result of the support and the encouragement and the learning that we get from the Guilford Fund for Education. You'll also note a small increase in the facilities line, and I want to point out that that is continuing to work our site improvement line, our preventative maintenance line, back to a level that we think it should be at. It was reduced several years ago when those budgets failed to pass, and we've been trying to catch up and make up since that time. This continues in that direction. It doesn't do everything that we'd like to see, but it takes another significant bite. And I also want to draw your attention to the significant increase in special education. You know that special education continues to be one of the most volatile lines that we have. We need to invest in the needs of our children with special needs. It's difficult to predict year to year. Last year, that increase we showed you was more like 12%. 7% we're comfortable with, but we'll give you more detail on that moving forward. Cost drivers in this budget. In past years, I've shown you cost drivers, and we've had 5 bullets up there. We don't have medical expenses. We don't have increasing medical costs as one of our cost drivers. We don't have a new transportation contract this year driving up transportation costs by 20%. We do have salary increases. I know I just spoke about salary increases as an efficiency, and yet we still see $800,000 in salary increases. Again, we're a people-intensive organization. 65% of our budget goes to salaries. We are about the people in the schools supporting our children every day. Even with the staffing reductions that we've made, salary costs go up every year, bless you, and this year they increase by $800,000. We have a contractual obligation to all of our employees, and that's the cost of meeting those obligations, and I don't begrudge a dime of that. That is money well spent. Additionally, I showed you that 7% increase in tuition, outplaced tuitions for some of our students with significant needs. This year, that cost is going up by $250,000, significantly less than the increase last year, but a needed increase. Those 2 items alone represent a $1.1 million increase to this budget. You'll remember that the total budget is increasing less than 1.3%. So while we're making investments in this budget, the investments are far smaller than the non-discretionary cost drivers, simply the cost of doing business that we absorb every year as we move that budget forward. Every year we talk about that special ed expenditure. I want to show you visually what that special education expenditure looks like. The red, or the blue line rather, is our budgeted special education budget. You can see that it's the most volatile line that we have. Every year we work very hard to predict what special education costs are going to be. There's no other line in our budget that fluctuates like that. The red line is our actual costs. As I look back, what I take pride in is that we've always predicted the movement in the right direction. There was one year that we came in below budget, but every other year those waves are actually pretty parallel. We've always known that this is a year of significant increase or this is a year of significant decline. We've never funded to the actual level that we need to fund over the last several years because of the pressure on that increasing cost. We work every year to try to predict, but we also work every year to meet the needs of our students. We have never in the history of that chart gone back to the town to request a special appropriation. We find ways to meet those costs within our budget, but we need to do better at predicting those moving forward. This budget builds in some contingencies around those special education costs that we think next year will get us back to point. I do want to note, however, and if you look back at years 10, 11, 11, 12, and 12, 13, you see a vastly different shape to this budget. It was in 10, 11, 11, 12, and 12, 13 that we started seriously looking at building capacity in the district to keep more of our special education students at home. We have reduced outplacements, not quite by half, but by more than a third since we began the work. And Mr. Hoey every year asks me to show this line. If we hadn't changed the direction of the growth in special education, I don't think we would be up to $8 million, but we'd be above where we are now. The fact is that we now keep more of our special education students in district, and by doing that, I honestly believe that we both give them a better education and we create an efficiency for the school system by doing so. We haven't eliminated costs, we haven't even flattened out costs, but I believe we've avoided costs that we could be incurring if we weren't servicing those students here at home with their neighbors and their friends. And then that leads us to investment. As I said, I have no intention of bringing forward a status quo budget. Every year, I honestly believe that our budgets have moved us forward. And this budget, like every budget, invests in continued improvement. We fully expect to provide more services every year, year over year, than we provided before. Specifically, this budget continues to invest in instructional coaching. I believe instructional coaching, as I mentioned earlier, is a way that we have been able to reallocate classroom resources to teacher support positions that, in fact, have a multiplier effect. By helping every teacher to be more effective in his or her classroom, we reach more students every single day. This budget has a significant focus on investing in STEM. I'm going to talk about maker spaces that we plan on supplying at every elementary school. I'm going to talk about a computer coding and science teacher at Adams, and I'm going to talk about continued focus on science professional learning or professional development. And finally, this budget invests in a continuation of the Artist in Residence program. I was pleased to hear our students mention that that is launching this week at Cox Elementary School, and some other miscellaneous stipends that are important to the work that we do. So let me talk about each one of those individually. This budget invests in 2 new literacy coaches, one at Adams Middle School and one at Guilford High School. And I am particularly excited about this expansion this year. We began working with coaches approximately 10 years ago. There were 3 positions in the district, and they supported only the K-4 classrooms. And they did that support only in literacy. Since that time, we have slowly and thoughtfully built out our coaching cohort, and our instructional coaches this year now work in literacy in literacy K-6, and in mathematics K-8. With this investment, we will be adding a literacy coach at Adams, which will bring full math and literacy coaching K-8. That means every teacher in this school district who teaches reading or numeracy, literacy or numeracy to our students, has the support of a full-time professional developer, a coach who helps that teacher individually in her or his work setting to be better at their specific job, growing on the specific things that they need to improve on and talking about their specific classroom tasks and students. Additionally, not only do we complete literacy and numeracy K-8, for the first time ever, this budget moves a coaching position to the high school level, something Mr. Macenti has been asking for 8 years. We are going to be placing a coach at the high school, a coach who works in literacy, which will be somebody who can work most directly with the English and social studies departments, but over time will be able to expand to work with any teacher who has a literacy component in his or her classroom. That's everybody. A professional developer who's there every day in the building to help every teacher be more effective. I simply have not seen a better or more effective investment, and the educational research bears it out, as well as our experiences here locally in Guilford. Those positions are each budgeted to be a teacher at the top step of the salary scale. When we go out to hire a coach, we need somebody who has a track record of being successful instructionally themselves, as well as somebody who understands professional learning and adult learning. I do want to point out, however, that currently none of our coaches are at the top step of the salary scale. We have had recent experience being able to hire experienced, talented teachers who aren't yet at the top of the salary scale. Now, they're not first, second, third, or fifth year teachers, but they're not 14 years of experience placing them at the top of our scale. So we will budget for that possibility, but we will see if we hire at a lower rate. This is one of the most exciting initiatives. It's one of the most exciting investments, and I believe it's one of the most exciting repurposing of existing resources that we have in this year's budget. But I'm also excited about the STEM work that we're bringing forward. This budget includes an investment in equipment and materials, building a maker space at every elementary school. I'm going to mention this later, but this budget does not include expanded art staffing at the elementary schools. There's reasons for why that's not included. But as we listened last year and this year to the community asking for expanded art opportunities, oftentimes as they talked about the value of art, they talked about student self-directed opportunities, they talked about opportunities for creativity, and it was interesting how many times people referenced engineering and architecture as values that come out of the art. A STEM space is a space in every school that will be stocked with 3D printers, computers, construction paper, cardboard, glue, tape, clay, scissors. It's a place where students can go and use their hands. It's a place where they can go to experience science activities, engineering activities, math activities, but I'd argue that they could also experience art activities. We will be taking in each elementary school a space that had previously been a computer lab and repurposing it as a maker space. The space will be supervised by the media specialist in each building, but open to every teacher in the building on a sign-out basis. So a teacher who wants to schedule a science activity in the makerspace will have the opportunity to do so. The art teacher could sign the space out to bring activities into the space. Our technology integration specialist will be working with the spaces and the teachers to make sure that those spaces do not become over-programmed, but remain spaces for exploration, for creativity, and for making. We're very excited about the opportunity there. This dollar amount includes monies that'll be coming both from the technology lease as well as an investment of $50,000 from the equipment line that you will see in your budget. I do want to note that while I've been talking primarily about the elementary schools, Baldwin has a rudimentary, if not fully fledged makerspace already, and we will be building out the Baldwin space as well, but it will not require an investment from the ground up as each of the elementary spaces will. Additionally, the work at Adams is going to include some staffing reductions that I'll mention in response to the enrollment, but we are also looking to add a second technology teacher, but a focus on less traditional technology and more on computer coding. An opportunity for students to look at gaming, to game design, to look at robotics, to look at computer coding and computer language, and that will become an additional elective opportunity for the students at Adams. And we will continue work around professional development with the science teachers, about which we're particularly excited. For the last year and a half, we have been working with the science teachers at Adams, looking at the next generation science standards and looking at science instruction that is more phenomenon-based rather than direct instructionally based. We've been working with an organization called the Center for Assessment out of New Hampshire for the last year and a half. As Adams has worked with that, the high school science department head has been sitting in on all of that work. As that work at Adams sunsets this year, we will be rolling into doing the same work with the high school science department. And Mr. McDowell, the head of the department here, who has participated with Adams, will be fully involved with the science staff here as they move that work forward. Again, the focus is on making science instruction more phenomenon-based and focusing on how we assess science to make it more about formative assessment rather than about summative assessment. This year, we set aside a small amount of money to create an artist-in-residence opportunity at the elementary schools. While there was a request last year to increase art staffing, the pressures of the schedule, the pressures of time, as well as the financial pressures, we did not respond by increasing the art staffing. We did say that we wanted to bring in opportunities for local artists to spend time in each of the elementary schools, creating opportunities for students, but also talking with teachers about how to embed the art standards more seamlessly into the instruction in the regular classroom. We have just launched that with the first week this year at Cox, but already we're looking and identifying that that's not enough. So rather than 1 week at each school, we want to expand that to be more opportunities, maybe with 2 different artists over the course of the year, and have 2 opportunities at every elementary school. Additionally, this budget includes small dollars for a middle school athletic coordinator. As we continue to grow the athletic programs at the high school as well as at the middle level, this would be a stipend to go to a teacher who would support Mr. Jarvis with all of the middle school athletic programs that happen in addition to the high school athletic programs. The state requires us to name a chemical hygiene officer. This is somebody to work with the materials in science classrooms that need to be disposed of and disposed of properly. Catherine Walker has been filling that responsibility for us for the last 20 years at no additional cost. We need to create an opportunity for a teacher to do that work. That would be a stipended position. And then we are looking to add a stipend for an extended school year coordinator. In last year's budget, you may recall that we eliminated the assistant special education coordinator. That was somebody who worked full 12 months and over the summer months were responsible for coordinating the extended school year. This would be an opportunity for somebody in the school district who is a 10-month employee to take on that responsibility, support Mr. Scanziano, make a few extra dollars over the summer, and get some leadership administrative experience for their own resume at the same time. With the elimination of the assistant director, this is needed. These investments total $25,000. These are small investments when you look at the dollars, but they're important to the opportunities that we will provide to our students. When you move through the efficiencies and the cost drivers and then the investments that we plan to make, the most important piece of information that we need to look at is the impact on staffing. And I show you this slide every year, but this year we're going to need to take some additional time to unpack this slide. Everything that I've talked about, the enrollment realities that we need to be responsive to, the drivers of the salaries being the single largest driver in our budget, and the investments that we want to make have an impact on staffing. It all comes down to the people who walk into our buildings. So let me take a little bit of time and walk through this slide. First, while you note that there is no change in administrative FTEs, we're neither increasing nor decreasing administrative staff, I do want to note that the salary line for central office administration is smaller this year than it was last year. We're spending fewer dollars on district-wide administration than we spent last year, and that's primarily a reality that was created by Dr. Keene's retirement and Dr. Crystal's hire. After 20 years in the position, Dr. Keene had worked herself up to a significant salary, and I'm sorry, but we didn't hire Dr. Crystal in at the salary that Dr. Keene went out at. In fact, if it were not for some transition around the high school principal position here, the overall administrative line would show fewer dollars this year than or next year in this budget than we're currently spending this year. That is only leveled out because we are building in some overlap and transition time for Mr. Macenti's anticipated retirement. We don't want the new principal to start here the day after Mr. Macenti leaves. We've built in a significant overlap. Were it not for that overlap, the entire administrative line, while it's the same FTEs, would be fewer dollars than it was last year. Currently, I can only say that the central office administration is less than it was this year. 400 of our 600 employees in the district are certified teachers. Most of our employees are teachers. Teachers are the single line, the single staffing line that is most impacted and most directly impacted by enrollment. So when we talk about staffing moving forward, I first need to make you, the board, and this community aware that this budget includes a reduction of 6 English language arts teaching positions at Adams Middle School. Currently, Adams Middle School is working on a 5-person team model. We have at Adams 6 teachers for mathematics. We have 6 teachers for social studies, and we have 6 teachers for science. We currently have 12 teachers for Adams. It is a holdover for English language arts at Adams. It's a holdover from a time when we separated a reading class and a writing class. And we have not been separating reading and writing instruction for some time, but we continue to have a double block of instruction around English language arts. It's unusual for middle schools to continue to have that staffing design, and that design has insulated Adams for several of the last years. You will remember that over several of the last years, we've made small reductions at the elementary level. There have been 1 or 2 elementary classroom positions that have been reduced in several of our last budgets. Elementary schools can respond much more nimbly to a reduction of 20 or 30 students because classrooms are self-contained. At a middle school where the classrooms are built into teams, the team structure insulates against those kinds of changes. But after years of those small reductions, and after this year's dramatic decrease at Adams, if we don't make this change, we're projecting class sizes in the 7th grade next year that will be smaller than your kindergarten classes in the district. When we look at student-to-teacher ratios, we need to take that into account. At the elementary level next year, we will be projecting a student-to-teacher ratio of 9-to-1, 9 students to every certified teacher at the elementary level. Now, that's not class sizes of 9. Our classes at the elementary level, I said earlier, are twice that. They will average 18. But that takes into account the support positions, the special education teachers, the language teacher, the world language, the specials teachers, as well as the speech teachers, the school social workers, the school psychologists, and the coaches that are programmed at the elementary level. At Baldwin, that ratio is 10 students to 1. At the high school, that ratio is 11.5 students to 1. If we don't make this staffing change, at Adams, we will have a student-to-teacher ratio next year of 8.5 to 1. With the staffing change, it moves to 9.5 to 1, right about in the ballpark of where those other schools are. This is about right-sizing Adams after that teaming model has insulated it for some time. The change will reduce the amount of contact time that students have in English language arts. It will, however, increase the amount of time that students receive in math and in science and in social studies. And by bringing the literacy coach into Adams at this time, it's exactly the right time. So as the English language arts teachers are making critical instructional decisions about how to adjust to that changing time, they'll have the support of an experienced coach to help them make those decisions. And as we expect, as the standardized tests do, as the Common Core does, and as the evolving instructional paradigm does, that English language arts will be more present in science, in social studies, and even in math, we will again have more time and have the support of that coach there to help the teachers make that adjustment moving forward. It is important to note that the Common Core state standards, we now refer to them as the Connecticut standards, do expect that literacy is a part of every subject area. The tests that we do so well on expect more reading and writing from every student every year. You can't be a scientist and not be a reader and a writer. You can't be a mathematician and not be a reader and a writer. You certainly can't be a historian and not be a reader and a writer. So this change, one, is responsive to the enrollment pressures that we're experiencing, but two, actually moves forward with the middle school philosophy of integrating instruction across subject areas. And I believe it's the right time to do it and that we can support our teachers appropriately as we make the change. While that's the single largest decrease in staffing, it's not the only one. This budget also recommends 4 elementary positions that will be reduced. 3 classroom positions spread across Lakes and Jones, primarily because of large 4th grade classes moving out, but also because of very small kindergarten or 1st grade sections that will move to more appropriate levels as those classes move in to 2nd and 3rd grade, as well as a district-wide intervention position, again, around reading and writing. As we change the way that we'll be looking at reading, writing instruction, we intend on bringing more phonics instruction directly into the mainstream classrooms, and we're looking at supporting students with special needs differently around reading and writing. This position we have found not to have the impact that we expected, and so we'll be repurposing those resources in another direction. That proposes a reduction of 10 teaching positions. That's the largest teacher position reduction that I've brought to you in my time in Guilford. From that reduction, we intend to repurpose some of those. You will see an increase at the classroom level of of 1 FTE at the high school. We expect to bring 1 part-time counselor position up to full-time as we continue to see needs to support students with their social emotional learning and wellness at the high school level. We project an increase in world languages and in math, each of 0.4 FTEs. Those are primarily necessary to meet the new expectations of the graduation requirements. State of Connecticut has changed graduation requirements. We have changed local policy to meet those requirements. And while that's not specifically about class size, it's about the flexibility required, because the graduation requirements require students to have a certain number of credits and a number of different buckets. To achieve the flexibility that we need to have all those offerings, these pieces will be required. There are teachers at the high school this year who needed to teach beyond a 1.0 assignment in order to meet those expectations. We were paying them beyond their full salary because we couldn't meet the staffing needs otherwise. This allows this high school to schedule appropriately. This slide includes the 2 coaching positions that I've already spoken about. As we continue to move instruction and as we continue to adjust instruction, teachers need to be supported. But more importantly than that, what I've come to understand about Guilford specifically is the importance of coaching teachers who are at the top of their game. It's easy to take teachers who are struggling and help them to stop struggling and to help them become effective. But when you've got a teacher who is at the top of his or her profession, who is good at what they do, the only way to continue getting better is to make professional learning individualized. That becomes about reflection, it becomes about specifics, and it becomes about what do I specifically have to do differently tomorrow than I did today. And I don't get that kind of learning by reading a journal article or by attending a conference somewhere outside of my school. I only get that kind of feedback by somebody being in my classroom with me today and then sitting with me and challenging me tomorrow over what I did. Think about it in the athletic framework. We use the term coach. Now, I'm very careful to say instructional coach, instructional coach, instructional coach. But when an athlete, even a young athlete, begins to become elite, what happens immediately? The parents get them a personal coach. When you start to outstrip those around you, you get individualized, differentiated coaching. We've been pushing that in our classrooms for a decade now, and this provides that kind of support for teachers. So I will again say it's the best investment that we made K through 6, and moving it 7 through 12 is the smartest investment we can make. Again, I mentioned the computer science position at Adams. You see that position there as well. And there is a very small increase in music staffing, very specific to LEAT. At LEAT, Principal Slowly has been finding opportunities for her music teacher to be spending more time with the special education population there. They've been seeing great response to that. The position is not full-time, and with this very small increase, we want to bring that specific position up to full-time to allow for more of those opportunities as next year unfolds. So yes, we are decreasing 10 positions in the district. We're repurposing 4.2 of those positions for a net decrease in teaching of 5.8 in this budget. Again, it's the most significant teaching decrease that I've brought to you. There's a very minor decrease in paraprofessional staffing. That is essentially a catch-up with a position that was decreased partway through the year last year. Special education paraprofessionals are programmed specifically on the needs of students. We're confident with that decrease. And there's a very small increase for a maintainer under custodial. This is an outside maintainer position. Currently, we have 1 position to maintain all of the grounds the school is responsible for. This would extend that to 1.5 positions to maintain all of those grounds for which we are responsible. Mr. Gurnham's been asking for that for about 4 years. This is the administrative draft of the budget that we bring to you tonight. Every year there is room for movement. Every year I try to point out some possible areas for the board to consider, so areas that I want to highlight tonight. The budget that we present to you sits at a 2.14% increase. There are opportunities for the board to increase that budget. Specifically, I want to say again, at your first public hearing, you heard an interest in increasing art staffing. This budget does not include an increase in art staffing. Last year, we looked very carefully at that. My concerns there run not to the benefit of having more art contact. It runs to the ability to prioritize that contact within an already tight schedule. Currently, we have the shortest elementary school day in any DIRG A or B district. We're not the only one at that level, but there's nobody with a shorter day than us. Currently, we also have, we offer art in the way that most of those other districts offer. There are some that offer more opportunities than we do, but none in the level of, in the length of the day that we offer. We meet all state mandates around art instruction. I do believe that we can continue to do better at integrating opportunities for the visual arts into the classrooms, and I do believe that the creation of the maker spaces, while they don't increase staffing, will provide opportunities for student agency and for creativity in those spaces. That's a place that the board, however, could discuss, and there could be increases. This budget comes very close to fully funding the actuarial recommendation for pension. It's the closest we've ever come, but it's not fully funded. Now, when we built the budget, we did not have the final recommendation. We worked on the best information we had. This budget falls short by about $45,000 of fully funding the actuarial recommendation for our pension for non-certified or teaching employees. That is an opportunity for the board to increase this budget if you wanted to meet that full obligation or full recommendation. I noted facilities. We continue to regrow that facilities line. You'll see a significant increase this year, but we have not worked our way back to having a preventative maintenance or a site improvement line that represents 1% of our overall budget. You'll see that we're close, but if the board was looking to add dollars to this budget, that's a place that I would encourage you to add. And I want to talk about special education tuition. While we believe that we've built in reasonable contingencies for tuition spending, we felt in the past that we'd built in reasonable contingencies. And over the last several years, we've missed in 9 out of the last 10 years. And we've had to find other sources to bail out that tuition line. If the board was looking to add to this budget, building in more tuition and transportation contingencies would be a place to look. On the other hand, I also recognize that this is the last year that the town will be absorbing significant increases due to bonding of this high school construction project. And our school budget is only one part of an overall town budget. And I know that there will be consideration both at this level and at the Board of Finance level about our bottom line and about whether that bottom line is something that is responsible at this time, considering that continuing taking on of new bonding. So if the board were looking for ways to reduce this budget, I would draw your attention to the fact that this budget does not currently include any retirement savings, as it has in the past several years. Now, with staffing reductions already accounted for, I would encourage the board to be very conservative around projecting any retirement savings. However, I could talk to the board about subject areas that are not experiencing reductions. I can talk to the board about opportunities of offering some limited retirement incentives, and there is the possibility of some reduction that would be possible there, although I will advise you to be conservative in any taking of a reduction in the salary line as an anticipation of retirements. I mentioned that you could increase pension. I will remind you that's one of my least favorite places to budget dollars. I don't see it going to the students' classroom experience. There have been past years that we haven't budgeted the actuarial recommendation. I don't know that I'd recommend it, but if we needed to make a reduction, that's an area where we could kick a cost down the road and possibly make a reduction there. It's worth considering. I don't know that I would recommend it, but I always put it on this list. Facilities. I just mentioned to you that we want to build up that contingency line. Preventative maintenance is an important investment. The spaces in which our students learn are important. However, if we were experiencing pressures to reduce this budget, you could look again at the increase that goes into this line, and you could think about reducing that increase. I would not encourage the board to consider reducing the line, but possibly reducing the amount of increase this year. And special education is the most volatile area that we have. It often goes up, but it sometimes goes down in unanticipated ways. There are contingencies built into the tuition line. It has gone beyond just budgeting for the students we have today and who we know will be returning next year. And so if necessary, the board could look at those contingencies and consider either reducing or eliminating them. And then I just wouldn't be responsible if I didn't note that we don't know exactly what the state's going to do. There have been other years where the state has made mid-year adjustments to the ECS, the Educational Cost Sharing Grant, the amount that we receive, and every year the amount that we receive in excess cost, special education costs, is variable. If the state were to change any of our anticipated revenues coming from that direction between now and the time that this budget gets approved, in fact, if the state were to change any of those expectations after budget approval, we may need to make other changes or other reductions in our budget to accommodate for lost revenue that we're currently anticipating in this budget from the state. You have several meetings upcoming to discuss any of those possibilities. That's your annual operating budget. That's the $61 million of your annual operating budget. Remember that this referendum will also include a question on bonding. We have talked about this at the operations meeting level, but I'll share it here. This year, we anticipate moving forward, and we will be asking you to approve a separate bonding request aside from approval of the operational budget that will include 3 projects. It will include a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning Phase 2 project at Baldwin Middle School. We are in the process of completing Phase 1, which was much larger than this, but this will finish the heating, ventilation, and AC upgrades at Baldwin. It carries a cost of $608,000. Additionally, we will be moving forward a heating, ventilation, and AC project at Guilford Lakes School. If any of you remember the opening of last year, the heating system, the AC system at Guilford Lakes is original to the building, and it failed twice last year. It failed as we came back to school during cooling season, and it failed as the weather turned cold and we moved into heating season. We have put money into that system just to keep it up and running, but the fact is that it needs to be replaced. The cost of that upgrade is $1.6 million. As we've done heating and ventilation upgrades in other buildings, we will at Adams, which will also include upgrades to doors and windows, so that in addition to improving the environmental systems in the building, we're making the building itself, the envelope of the building, better insulated and a better savings, so that as we're cooling the building, we're keeping that cooling in the building, and as we're heating the building, we're not heating the spaces outside the building. So improving the windows and doors makes it more energy efficient. I will also note that as we do those efficiency upgrades, any first floor areas, we make security upgrades as well. And then finally, every time we move a bond forward, there are architectural and engineering costs associated with that bond. You see these represented here. So we anticipate asking for your approval for a bond separate from the approval of the operating budget of $2,615,960 for energy efficiency and environmental upgrades at Baldwin and Guilford Lakes School. And there's one possible addition that we don't have complete for you tonight, but the board is aware, and I want to make sure that the community is aware, that in collaboration with Park and Rec, and in collaboration with the Standing Fields Committee, and in collaboration with the town of Guilford, we are looking at our original turf field. The turf field that is now referred to as the stadium field most often. It's the field where we play football. That location, the carpet on that artificial field is reaching the end of its life. In fact, we've squeezed more years out of that carpet than we should have, and the carpet is due for a regular replacement. In addition, the track around that facility is in very poor repair, and the track needs to be upgraded. So we are looking at bringing forward a possible bonding request that could include some combination of resurfacing, well, possibly re-engineering and then resurfacing the track, replacing the carpet, that's the grass portion of the artificial field, and then possibly replacing the fill. That is currently a rubber field, while the upper field is an acrylic sand field. So we're looking into possible fill replacements that could include or might be natural rubber, which is doesn't have the concerns of carcinogens that recycled rubber have, or it could be acrylic sand as we have in the upper field, some of which will require some re-engineering costs associated. We do expect to have a final figure on this, and we will have it for you before we ask you to approve this budget and these bonding requests before moving forward. We just didn't have those ready for you tonight. And finally, And I think more than any other year, it is important to say that this budget focuses on the students who are in the classrooms in front of us every single day. It would be insincere to say that this budget doesn't include some compromises. It does. But those compromises have been made thoughtfully, they've been made planfully, and they've been made through an instructional lens. Those compromises, in partnership with the investments that this budget includes, allow us to continue focusing on teacher learning, teacher efficacy, and rigorous experiences fueled by engaging tasks for every student in every classroom every day. The bottom line is it continues to build on the successful work that we have done. And finally, we're the best return on investment that you're going to see in a Connecticut school district. We continue to be one of the most successful and recognized school districts in the state of Connecticut, most recently illustrated by the recognition of this high school as a national blue ribbon high school. We continue to punch above our weight. We've got other schools coming in to ask what we do, and we've got professional organizations who want to get in and be part of the work that we do here. The Center for the Center for Assessment in New Hampshire that I referenced, we didn't seek them out and bring that science work to them. They became aware of Guilford, they got to know what we were doing, and they brought the proposal to us. They said, we want to be part of what's happening. We currently work with a video platform where we're working with every principal and every coach in the district to be more self-reflective and to be better practitioners themselves. And we receive that platform from the vendor at no cost because they want their product in our district. They want to see how we're using it, and they leverage our successes for other sales. They don't charge us. They want to be part of what's happening here. The fact is, it doesn't matter if you look at outside objective evaluations, if you look at state accountability measures, college placements, career paths, art experiences, or athletic performance. I will put this school district up against any other one in Connecticut, no questions asked. We have maintained a focus on learning that has driven every decision that we have made and led to continuous improvement. And we continue to provide an unparalleled return in partnership with the communities and the families and the parents. Nobody is seeing the results for the investment that we're seeing in the school district. I've done a lot of work recently with the ex-commissioner of education, Ted Sergi. And Ted Sergi has over and over come back to what's happening in Guilford. There's something good happening in Guilford, and that needs to continue, and this budget affords for that. And this side says discussion, but I know that you have meetings scheduled over the next month for discussion. I know that we've received the first 18 questions from board members. I know that there are more that we'll be receiving tomorrow. We will continue to respond to those questions and get those responses back to you. We're happy to engage in conversation tonight, but we also have multiple other events scheduled with you, a few of which I want to name. I do want to remind the community that January 27th and 28th are both scheduled at the chorus room at Baldwin to be budget
At
hearings.
Adams.
I'm sorry, at Adams. Those are opportunities for the community to respond to what is in this administrative draft of the budget before the board takes final action on the budget. Those are always productive meetings every year, so I want to make sure that the community is aware of those two meetings, January 27th and 28th. I believe they're at 7 p.m. and they're both scheduled at Adams. And it's your pleasure if you'd like to have some conversation now or if you'd like to defer to the follow-up meetings that we have scheduled.
Is there anyone on the board who has particular questions now that they would like to ask?
I have one question, and it's really a question, perhaps that'll take some thought. Have we ever looked at essentially the savings in providing as much in-house professional development that we do at that value versus what it would cost to provide that by sending folks out? And I'm recognizing how difficult that is, at least for a number of reasons, right? I mean, I
Right.
think we are recognizing that the value of in-house PD comes in for several different reasons. And also that the cost includes substitute teachers while teachers are, et cetera, et cetera. But is there a way, has anyone tried to calculate that kind of?
So I want to say that we've talked about it a lot, but it will be really hard to measure for a number of reasons, right? In particular, because I believe we haven't just eliminated the traditional form of professional development. If anything, we have enhanced it with what we've done here. So while we may have reduced some cost in what was happening before, the perfect opportunity is that a few teachers or coaches do continue to go out to a specific training or
Right.
principles. When they come back, that training, so the old cliche was that you go away for some day-long event or you just attend a faculty meeting and it's great and you love what you learn and it's wonderful and exciting and you are energized professionally. And then you get back to your classroom the next day and you do what you've always done. The beauty of coaching, as well as the PLCs, is that when you come across that new learning and you go into your classroom, you've got somebody who's helping you implement it. So it's the difference of watching a video on improving your golf swing and then having the pro standing next to you watching you try out that new golf swing 100 times and giving you immediate feedback in a real setting. So I think we're providing way more professional learning in a more authentic environment than we ever could have provided
Right.
under the old model. And I think we'd end up having to sort of project what would we be spending if we weren't doing it this way. It hasn't displaced the old model. It's reduced it somewhat,
Okay.
but it's enhanced it like we've never seen enhanced before. And then in conjunction with the professional learning community, right, the coach has the opportunity, again, like we do with our teachers in the classroom, a coach can meet with one teacher one-on-one or can meet with all 3 third grade teachers collaboratively. The coach at the high school will be able to do some work with the whole English department during their regularly scheduled professional learning time where they all have common planning time, but can also then follow up individually with each of us. So remember what we talked about last week at that meeting. Let's talk about how you're doing it in your classroom, and let me tell you about how Jason's doing it, because he's doing something completely different, and you get that kind of individual differentiated attention. I don't know how. We can certainly go back and try again. I'm not sure. It feels to me like apples and oranges, and so I'm not
No.
sure how you'd measure them.
And maybe that's
It's
enough,
hard.
right? I mean, I think that we have heard over and over and over again, when we get the opportunity every year to sit down with teachers in the district, the board gets an opportunity every year to meet with teachers in the district, and if there's one thing we hear every year is the value of coaching. And then we hear it when we meet with the district leadership team. I just, I didn't know if there was another kind of a value added there.
I can certainly talk to some folks who've been doing researching on it.
Right.
And in fact, there's a group that comes to mind, the district management group, who focuses on sort of that type of administrative managerial return on investment. I can certainly ask them if they've been able to create a metric or if they could look at it. They did some work with us when we were looking at busing some time ago.
Yeah.
We were looking at bus routes.
Oh, that's right.
There are real sort of nuts and bolts. So I can certainly look at them. They're a combination of folks out of the Harvard Business School and the Harvard School of Ed trying to apply some business principles to making school systems be more efficient. I will say that, and I mentioned it before, this budget does include some compromise in the face of enrollment realities. I anticipate that at some point in this process, as we bring this budget forward, there will be the question, if you can afford to make 10 reductions in staffing because of enrollment, why aren't you taking the full 10 in reduction? Why are you building back some of these other positions? And to me, that's essential. You don't make a reduction of that type without building in supports for the people who will be continuing to do the work. Now, again, I want to be clear, our class sizes aren't shooting through the roof. The elementary class size doesn't move at all in response to those changes. But you still want to make sure that as you make those sorts of concessions to the enrollment, that you find opportunities to improve that. Remember, it's the second of the 3 priorities. It's that professional environment that we build around the teachers so that they can be as effective as they can in the classroom. I will argue strenuously against simply reducing 10 teaching positions and not building back in those 4.2 that we have identified in other areas, particularly the two around coaching.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I know I've given some really short reports of late. I'm sorry that this one was not.
No,
that
no,
good.
no, no, this is an important one. We wanna hear the details. All right. Okay, we are now up to 8.1 on the board agenda, which is a personnel item. We are being asked to ratify the resignation of the following teacher: Lauren Taracco, GHS, AMS, and Adams, and Baldwin social worker. Is there a motion to ratify that resignation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, 8.2, approve a $1,450 donation of a treadmill and two-tory mini bike from a private individual. Is there a motion to approve that?
So, go ahead.
Second.
Can you talk a little bit about, is that just going to our athletic department,
Yep.
I assume?
That has been directed towards Jake, and I will encourage you to take a look at the exhibit in your packet because
Right.
you'll recognize the name of the donor.
Okay.
Right.
Yes, it's a
Terrific.
private donation going to the athletic program.
Okay.
And Jake brought the request forward.
Terrific. 8.3, to act on recommendations from the policy committee. These were policies and regulations that came to us last month as receive items.
That's right, yeah. That's- wow.
Moira Rader, who is our policy chair, is unable to be with us tonight. So I will briefly walk through them. The first is policy 5326, dress and grooming. There is an accompanying regulation. This reminder that this, the changes, the updates are to specifically provide text and language around definitions of what is appropriate and inappropriate, and specific examples, particularly around and including words and symbols about blackface, swastika, and attire that falls within all of our named concerns on the basis of race, color, national origin, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, religious affiliation, or any classification protected under state or federal law, including but not limited to swastikas and the Confederate flag.
I will just note for the board again that we don't believe this changes the intent of the policy at all. It is just more specific in calling out some examples of the type of language that we find to be inappropriate, language, symbol, or dress that we find to be inappropriate.
So I'm going to first ask for a motion to approve the policy 5326 for dress and grooming.
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
And then I'm going to ask for a motion to accept the changes to regulation 5326, dress and grooming.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Okay, and then policy 5126, the suspension, expulsion, exclusion, removal policy. This is also, I believe, to reflect.
It's essentially the
These
same
changes.
language being set in two different policies where it seemed appropriate to set it, but it is essentially the same language.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve policy 5126?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And again, is there a motion to accept regulation 5126? Again, the accompanying regulation to the policy, suspension, expulsion, exclusion, and removal.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, an opportunity now for reports from committees. I don't know that there's a report from the policy committee. They did not meet in the last month.
Beyond what you just approved, I don't
Right.
think so.
The Operations Committee?
Yes. We had an extended session. We reviewed responses to the first 18 questions that had been submitted about the budget, and there was significant discussion on that. We had a very good review of some of the facilities projects. There's quite a bit going on. And we also reviewed reports relating to our medical expense account, the tuition expense account, and our food service expenses. All of those are pretty much in line with what we had been seeing before. So that's what we were up to in operations.
Terrific. Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment Committee. Do we have?
We haven't
I
met
don't think we've met.
Meeting on the 27th.
Okay, so we'll be meeting
on the 27th
on the
before your
27th,
workshop
before the
meeting.
workshop meeting. Terrific. No report there. Any liaisons to town committees that have reports to offer at this moment? No? Okay. Liaison to Learn Board of Directors? You have something
So
to-
I attended the first meeting of Learn, which is a regional educational system that covers from Guilford up through Stonington. Things that I thought were particularly interesting to Guilford, I'm sure you guys have heard of this statute. It's 10248, which allows us to potentially roll it's just increased from 1% to 2% of our overall budget into basically a savings fund that we can then apply to capital spending year over year. So it's something we could maybe look into, but the interesting thing was the increase from 1% to 2%. Learn also has a communications arm that is available to us. So when we talked about potentially using Facebook or other social media to reach out to the community at large, that's something that we can actually have Learn either do for free, or if it becomes extensive, they could actually charge us back. They are focusing on having people of color be approved as teachers. Last year, I guess we graduated in the state 12 people of color as for teachers out of 200, which is tragic. So they are working on some fast-track ways to get people of color available, particularly to the students in those areas, so that they're getting taught by folks who look like them. Then, one of the things that was most interesting to me was different collaborative ideas between, like us, Madison, and Clinton, or different regions, where they talked about possible bus contract regulations, and also potentially having Learn hire something like an AP teacher that would then service AP English, for example, in Clinton, Guilford, and Madison, where instead of us kind of having to bear the burden of lower enrollment and trying to still be able to provide for our kids, how can we help accommodate for any kind of small class where we can maybe share it with other districts?
We're particularly excited about opportunities that sort of partnering might offer around different world languages, a Mandarin, right? So where one school district may not have a full teaching load for a teacher who only holds a Mandarin certification, we may be able to enter into these kinds of agreements. That will involve some statutory change, in my understanding, but it's exciting that Learn, that's exactly the kind of thing we've wanted Learn to be working on for the last several years. So that one's particularly exciting.
So the first item you mentioned, I am on a Board of Ed
Listserv.
listserv, right, for CAVE. And a question went out last week about an account. So legislatively, there's ability for boards of education to, at the end of a academic year, at the end of a fiscal year, essentially, hold on to 1% of funds that are then held and can only be used for educational purposes. As you noted, they're increasing it to 2. And the question that was raised to board chairs across the state was, does your town have this? I will say, as I'm watching email responses come in, some do, many do not.
Right.
We do not. And it's something that that the Board of Ed actually has to work together.
Right. We couldn't
with
create the fund unilaterally. It would
That's
be in
right.
partnership with the Board of Finance.
with the Board
right.
of Finance. But that's what that is referencing. All right, thank you. It is really terrific. So we have had oh gosh, over as many years as I think I've been on the board, various members of the board attending Learn meetings, taking turns as we could. It's really terrific. I think it's going to be extremely valuable to us to have someone consistently
Right.
at that
Thank you
meeting
for doing that.
representing us and getting the information. So I appreciate your taking that
Yeah, it was a
role.
great
I
group.
really think it's going to help. I mean, it's just win-win to have our involvement with that group. So, excellent. So that concludes the reports of committees. There is now an opportunity for public questions. Is there anyone who is interested in addressing the board with a question or? Okay, I was going to say, you can ask us without coming up. I also noted earlier that there may be people who had comments that they wanted to hold until they heard Dr. Freeman's presentation. This could certainly be an opportunity to bring that forward. Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everybody.
Good.